Hey guys, what happens when a DM plays the entire game by himself? Our group has up to 5 DMs, out of 7 people at any one time. We've been playing for many years together, and all the people involved are close friends. This isn't an attack on the person in question, as they are usually a good player, and most certainly a good person. This is just a reasonably extreme case of how not to react when a game doesn't go to plan. Out of the 5 DMs, one of those hosts the main campaign. One of them has a sort of Delta Green SCP type of campaign, and 2 of them have their campaign in the same Dune-like world that has a very Monster of the Week episodic type of feel. And then the 5th one, which the story is about. This particular quasi-campaign was designed to be a drop-in, drop-out sort of thing. We are all soldiers in the same company, and are sent out for essentially random combat encounters. And there is some kind of narrative, but it's terribly unclear and not really important. We only know that names are significant when the DM literally tells us, and often they'll have been mentioned once in passing during an irrelevant encounter several real-life months prior. And when I say in passing, I really do mean this. One such example was a person mentioned in Session 0 as a friend to the company, but 6 real-life months later, with no meeting nor mention of him in-game, we were nearly executed for letting him die in a were-ape's lair, just because we didn't prioritize his rescue. I mention this because this player is our group's only player that prefers combat and rolling mechanics over actual roleplay and story. He is also our resident rules lawyer, and his PCs are very much min-maxed. He actually plays these min-maxed characters incredibly well, and gives them compelling reasons for his weird dips and unusual combinations. But we all know that he's only really here to roll as many damage dice as humanly possible. The games he runs are an excuse for him to do combat encounters, which everyone is fine with, but also not that into. I've probably played the most of these games out of our normal game group, and he also invites some of his other pals to join in sometimes, usually to pad out the numbers. I'm not all that big into combat in general, but I like my friend and I like D&D, so why not? But the following horror story takes place over 2 sessions, and the DM and I are the only recurring characters. In Session 1, there was an attack on the southern border, and the enemy had taken the halfling prince captive, and we needed to get them back. The party in Session 1 consisted of a Kenku rogue, who was me, a half-elf bard, and an Aasimar paladin. It was a weird party, but what are you going to do? We were the only players that were free that night, that the DM wanted to run this. So we went to the southern border and found an encampment. The encampment was huge, but full of low CR enemies, and there were barrels of gunpowder strategically placed around the place, mostly near campfires. There was also a few trebuchets, cannons, hay bales, etc. We used a locate spell to find the prince, who was in a tent at the back of the camp. However, it didn't seem that there was any unguarded way around the encampment. Essentially, the DM had put together a siege type of encounter, and he wanted us to set off some sick explosions and just mow the bad guys down. He wasn't counting on the fact that none of these characters were particularly violent, nor any of the players particularly inclined to commit spending the entire rest of the session in initiative. Instead, we worked out an intricate heist plan, and using some well-placed darkness and the power of flight, we managed to get the halfling prince out of there with barely a scuffle. Honestly, I was actually super proud with how well we did solving the problem. It was very in character, and we each used our individual skills. Plus, I got to make some fun noises. The DM, however, was not pleased. The solution that we took us no longer than an hour and a half, and then the session ended. And right about this time is when I actually worked out what the encounter was actually supposed to be. He hadn't prepped anything else, and had asked us to put aside 5 hours for gameplay, as well as saying that it was probably going to be a 2-parter. So it was clear that he had actually expected this to last 5 hours of just combat. It really sucks that it didn't go how he wanted it to, but we all had fun. But a DM never forgets, and his justice would be swift and without mercy. In session 2, the other 2 players didn't come back for the following session. This is unlikely to be for any reason other than they are infrequent and random. This session was around a month after the last one, and I was the only returning character. The characters coming for this one were a tad bit more fighty. We had a monk, a wizard, a barbarian, a fighter, and myself as a rogue again. The DM started off joking about how we weren't going to ruin anything this time, and he was ready to get us back, which was already ominous. And by this time, the rest of the group had heard about our tactical extraction, and had approved of it, even though the us was technically only me. This time, the fighting started before the game even did, and we started the session with news that the castle we all lived under was under siege, and we were supposed to defend it. I have no idea how we didn't notice a battle going on outside our house, but I suppose if you're going to railroad, you might as well go all in. And go all in he did. We went outside to find that our heavily defended castle, that was supposed to be full of soldiers, wasn't defended. Everyone else was out adventuring, and we needed to hold back the enemy ourselves. There were hundreds of enemies, and they even had a dragon. We briefly spent time formulating a plan that actually looked like it could work. We had a few PCs that could fly, so we worked out a system of essentially bombing them from the castle. We would send the flying PCs over the army to drop stuff on them, so the others could work the defenses and ranged attacks from the front. We could then deal with the chained and not immediately aggressive dragon when we had the ability to do so. The DM tried to push us towards melee using the castle keeper as what was essentially a DMPC. We refused as it didn't make any sense to go into melee with so many enemies, and the only person that agreed to do so was the barbarian, whose entire shtick was to suggest stupid ideas. We prepped ourselves for battle, we lit things on fire, and prepared our spells. I also drank a potion that I had been saving since the first session to help us get out of this alive. We rolled initiative, and the temporary DMPC got something ludicrous like a 30. On the first round, he teleported us next to the dragon. We were all prepared, and the character had watched us prepare, without mentioning teleportation as even an option. He just went and did it. I wasted a great buff that was essentially useless in this particular situation, as a few of the other players have done so as well. The DM then revealed that the rest of the company had returned from adventuring, all of them, at this exact moment, so they drew their swords and began fighting. Every round of initiative took around 20 minutes, and the entire battle was essentially just the DM against himself, while we fought a dragon. The dragon was chained, so it couldn't fly, and it only seemed to want to slash at us. It wasn't an interesting or challenging fight. The DM, on the other hand, was having a great time, and it became clear that he had actually rolled up a lot of these characters, as he mentions rolling superiority, hexes, and smite die a few times. We all mostly switched off, and it dragged on even more, and the beginning of every turn was, "Okay, so what's actually going on?" followed by everyone making their generic attacks, then waiting on the DM for 10 minutes. We played for around 7 hours, and by that I mean the DM did, with the other players slowly dropping off and leaving, until there was only eventually 2 of the PCs remaining. He had a DMPC finish off the dragon, after he took out the entire army. He even read a one-liner he had prepared for it, and it wasn't funny. This was at the beginning of the year, and since that night, we haven't played his campaign once. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have a story that you'd like me to narrate, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.